Welcome back to episode 2 of the College Lacrosse Show. This week we break down the big week for Hopkins, 2 ranked victories. Also chat a little Utah, Ohio State. Go with our FAFO Players of the Week, a new segment called the Sicko Game of the Week. And then we look at some of the big matchups coming up this weekend. Let's get right into it. Episode 2 of the College Lacrosse Show. Let's go. All right, welcome back. Episode 2 of the College Lacrosse Show. I'm John Donville. You're Dan Arestia. Really excited to continue doing this all season long. As a reminder, we're on Spotify, YouTube. We'll be on lacrosseculturedaily.com. I hope we will be on Apple Podcasts this week. That is our focus. And yeah, really excited. And welcome back, Dan. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be back again. We've got week 0, week 1. I don't know what people like to call it. A lot of people call it week 0, but the idea of it not being a week, like 0 isn't a week, doesn't make sense to me. But I don't know. I guess it's week 0. We have a whole lot of action from the week. We had ranked teams playing. We had a top 10 game. We even had some games, a little Tuesday for the Hunter type action yesterday. So it doesn't take long for it to get wound up and feel like you're right in the thick of it. It certainly feels that way right away.
Yeah, no doubt. I also think week 0 is stupid because these games matter. My freshman year, now Ivy League was a little bit different, but my freshman year we dropped our opening game to Colgate, and it almost really haunted us. These games matter, and especially for teams playing top 10 matchups, which we've seen a few of, and we'll see a few more obviously this week. But I'm right with you there. Let's start with maybe just some big thoughts. After watching one weekend.
I guess college lacrosse to me doesn't really start, or any lacrosse season doesn't really start to me until one thing in particular happens. And it happened almost immediately during the games. It was, you go to social media and there is complaining about a stream in some way, shape, or form. And I have a point of view on lacrosse streams. I know everybody wants every stream to be free and look like the Olympics all the time.
Yeah.
I like to live in reality, and that's not really going to be the case. My point of view is I will never complain about paying for a stream that's worth paying for. And there's a few I think that fall into that category. One of them, the ones when I called out in social and a few people kind of came at me for it, was, look, the way Denver streams games out there is really good. And the price is like $10 a month. It used to be called like Pioneer All Access. Now I think it's like Midco Sports or something. But like, you get a knowledgeable broadcast. You had Bill Tierney on the broadcast this week. You get Eric Law on it some weeks. Like, the analysis is good. The camera's close to the field. The quality's great. You get good replays. I'll pay for that, and I'll never complain about it because that's part of supporting that program, supporting the game. I know everybody thinks Denver's got a huge budget. It should be free. If you want to complain about BTN Plus and Maryland putting a camera
on the moon,
like the outer solar system somewhere, 100%. It's a legit complaint to be like, I'm paying for this and this is what I get.
Yeah.
Last night's Hopkins Towson game, we'll get to it. Like, it was free. So I try not to be like, look, they're putting it out there for nothing. So I'm not going to complain too much because it's free, but also like, watching, Super Nintendo lacrosse with an FPS somewhere maybe pushing the double digits is not the best. So like that was one thing I always take away. I will appreciate the feedback we got during the games, or at least I got during the games. I got messages from people who were either, calling me out for something I said or saying, hey, nice job on the episode 1. We both probably should take a little sad mea culpa lap on that. We did a story draft last week, and neither one of us picked that there's a team playing for a three-peat this year as one of like our major stories of the season. So to the person who shouted that out, like, yeah, we're working the kinks out. All right, we're going to get to that stuff. I promise.
We did favorite storylines, not the biggest storylines, our personal favorites.
For sure, yeah. My favorites, exactly. Yeah. And then the other thing that I heard a lot from people, or that I kind of took away week 1, is, man, a lot of people love to bet on lacrosse. Man, there's a lot of talk about that out there. And I don't personally bet on lacrosse. I know we have like rules about what we can and can't say about it and that kind of stuff. There were some hilarious bad beats in week 0. If you were a Hofstra Iona better, if you were, first of all, you might consider calling 1-800-GAMBLER.
Yeah,
Second of all, uh, the game total in Hofstra-Iona was 23 goals, right? Hofstra scored 20. Easy over, right? Wrong. Game went under. 23, Hofstra scored 20, and the final score was 20-2. So the game went under. Holy Cross, right there. Game spread 6.5. They lost by 7. Game total 23.5. 24 goals scored. If you were a Holy Cross bettor, again, consider 1-800-GAMBLER, but they ended that game on a 3-goal run. They were right there for the Holy Cross bettors. The Crusaders almost did it for you. And if you're a gambling burner who wants to like be part of doing picks on the show, I'm sorry, I don't respect burners enough to do that. I need to know what your name is.
Yeah, if you're any burner, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Try again when you put your name and your face on your account,
Yeah,
and maybe we'll have a better conversation about it. But otherwise, probably going to pass. Thank you, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like the action itself was great. We had a good, if you want to call it an upset, with the Utes going to Ohio State. We'll get to all this stuff in a bit. But the games themselves, I thought were what you would expect to see. The places where you see, I think, teams deficient most in week 0 are things like rides, clears, sometimes man up, man downs, look very basic. It's stuff that just hasn't maybe been practiced a ton, or they haven't installed a ton yet. So it's a kind of a place where you're just counting on like the athleticism sometimes of your middies to carry you, or the athleticism of a riding attack to carry you a little bit. And it can be a place that decides games, which is huge. But that was kind of the place where you looked around, I think, in a lot of games and we're like, oof, this needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But, you know, I mean, I'm happy lacrosse is back. I don't know what you saw that you stood out to you, I guess, most.
Yeah, I had just a bunch of things written down that I saw across kind of the teams. One is youth gets punished, and there's a lot of teams with youth. We've talked about that last week in terms of, you know, the teams. A lot of teams graduated stuff. A good example is Denver starting 2 freshmen at close defense. And the area where that comes out the most is in the clears. And I think that's why you saw a lot of field clears. There's a lot of guys, you know, who haven't had a lot of reps at it. And then another thing, which is like interesting because like last year was my first time really covering lacrosse, and I was really hard into the playoffs at the time because that was when I was done my own season, etc. Teams just slide way more and arguably way too much in February. And there's, you know, you can kind of see like down the line, it's like at some point, you know, some of these teams are just going to stop sliding to offenses. And a lot of the problems that defenses had in week 1 were going sliding and supporting things that they don't need to help. I think there's probably some defensive coaches out there who'll tell you that's not a bad thing because you're trying to practice that. At least you're showing that you're supporting. But that's just one thing I saw. Another thing, you know, people have kind of talked about how we're getting towards the end of this portal grad transfer area. Well, we're not there yet. There's a lot of grad transfer. Every team has like every broadcast you watch is transfer. And a lot of guys still playing well. And then another thing, I was meant to write about this before the year, but Notre Dame last year would play 4 attackmen sometimes. They would bring in, like Taylor would take the odd shift off, and then they would play those 3 midfield lines. I was kind of wondering if we're going to see more of that this year. And Hopkins is playing 4 attackmen, and I'm kind of curious if you know, this is kind of a new thing that we might see with a little more variety, or if they're just trying to figure out kind of what their best lineup is. But a few things I'm watching there.
Yeah, I think the 4 attackman thing is a good shout. You used to kind of see more of that where there was like that 4th attackman would like be part of the extra man, or he would be the kind of guy who could finish inside, was sort of a specialist that way. But it's evolved to where that guy kind of just moves through the attack and plays throughout the game. I think your 2 points about sliding early and youth being punished, I think there's a correlation, not a correlation really, but a connection between the two.
Yeah, 100%.
Teams who have newer or younger or less experienced short stick D middies, sometimes those guys haven't earned or don't quite have the level of like trust and understanding of the poles behind them maybe yet. Or if it's new poles, they might not totally feel like I've been on the field with this guy and I know when somebody's covered, I know when somebody's not covered. You know, I have a feeling that like, all right, this guy's going down the alley and I need to go because it looks like he's got a step, even though like, you know, my top tier short stick D middy's still right in his hip, but this is new to me.
Totally.
I think that's the kind of like understanding between the two position groups that's tough to foster without game experience. You really can't do it in practice. So those two things are important. And I'm of the school of thought that sliding like way too aggressively like that, usually to me, it usually ends up being a bad thing, particularly against teams that move the ball well or kind of are more highly skilled, because all you're kind of doing is creating an opportunity for them.
Sure.
Like you're unsettling yourself when you didn't need to on defense, and a team that really can hum the ball kind of, pass forward and be at the backside where you maybe you're helping from quickly will get a good shot out of that. So I think that's a good call out too. It is kind of that understanding between your poles, your close defense, and the guys who are going to get dodged on most often, your shorties, and understanding when I need to go and when I don't on February 1st. That probably hasn't been developed yet.
Yeah, totally. And another like just big trend in the sport of lacrosse is the general prioritization of athleticism in the defensive midfield. It used to be pretty notable when short sticks would really lock somebody down. It feels like it happens like most games now, where you'd say like, wow, the D middies have an athleticism advantage, and I think as that trend continues, it's especially in the playoffs, like it happens every year. It does get muddy in the playoffs, and interestingly too, a lot of these teams are looking for ex-attackmen because we graduated so many guys. Angelis is gone. Lampert from Denver's gone. Pat Kavanaugh's gone. Schellenberger's gone. Malaver's out of Maryland. Like these guys were all the ex-attackmen for their teams. So not a lot of I didn't see a ton of behind the net stuff in week one for the games that I watched. But let's kind of get into the games. I think let's just take the Hopkins kind of week as one here. So 2 big wins.
Sure.
First of all, respect Coach Millie and his staff for playing these games right away. They get 2 big wins, like I said, at Denver, a very good win, 16-11. I had in the face-off category, and they won the face-offs again last night, I believe, against Towson. So I think that is probably the number one good sign. Number 2 sign is Melendez looked really good and aggressive and scored a bunch. And then, the only other note I had really from the Denver game was just a lot of mistakes by Denver. They had 4 failed clears, a bunch of kind of silly turnovers on offense. Hard to overcome those types of things against good teams.
Yeah, I think, one thing I noticed as I kind of went back and I rewatched that Hopkins Denver game, particularly like the first half a few times now. And one thing, and you actually, if you listen, you can hear Coach Tierney call it out on the broadcast, but I think the first 5 faceoffs in the game, one of them was a violation that went Denver's way. So Denver got to run like a possession out of it. The other 4, Denver actually won the clamp and picked up the ball and then immediately turned it over or couldn't handle like some pressure from Hopkins. So, you look at that, those go into the book as, look, Denver won the clamp, picked up the ball, won the faceoff. Those are faceoff wins. And that category was even more lopsided than the stat sheet might indicate to you. Like if you just go look at box score after the game, you're just like, oh, Logan Callahan did good. Denver kind of maybe kept it a little bit close. Like, no, they didn't. It was worse. Like even when they won the faceoff, a number of times it ended in a turnover, and that really ends up burying you. So that was certainly one thing I took away from that game. I think in both Hopkins game, I would say more so in the Towson game, the ball's not moving as quickly as maybe I would have expected it to move for Hopkins. Definitely gets a little bit sticky at times for some guys. Sometimes it gets up to their midfield and each guy kind of takes a little dummy dodge and then moves it on, or dummy dodge and then move it on. And sometimes you would rather see them just kind of like hum it, find the matchup, and attack. I think kind of like the speed of the ball movement with Hopkins, given their personnel, I think I would like to see it be faster. It was definitely better in the Denver game, again, particularly in the early going. They were really good at like the dodge through Melendez or whoever at X, and then it would get back to, when I saw like Bauer on a secondary dodge against the defense that had already slid and maybe was trying to recover, he's shifty and quick enough that he's able to just kind of find shots really, really quickly on an unsettled Dodger. So there was that. And then I was surprised that, I guess not surprised, but Denver just went with Casey Wilson on Matt Collison and just kind of went like beef on beef with it and really didn't send too many polls at Collison. And, to our point about short stick D-middies and sliding too soon before, they really trusted Casey Wilson in that matchup. And I think he did pretty well in terms of, he made Collison a passer. He made him kind of run to a spot where the angles were sharper and made him feed the ball. And Collison had, I think, 3 assists against Denver. But if you limit him as a goal scorer and you do it with a shorty, I think Denver can probably feel okay about the way Wilson did in that matchup. I know, look, Collison's still going to find the score sheet, but if you're doing it where Matt Collison's their assist guy, I think you're probably feeling better than him, dodging to the middle and getting a really good shot at net. I thought Wilson did a nice job of forcing Collison to more alley and more kind of outside dodges and sharper angles that I'm sure was on the Denver scout, and I thought Wilson executed it pretty well.
Yeah, agree with all that. Hopkins' best offense was Melendez getting picks towards the middle and Collison either getting himself towards the middle or getting a pick towards the middle. And they'll have the Melendez picks all day because Collison's going to get the pull on pretty much everybody, who doesn't have a Casey Wilson alpha type guy. So they're going to have those ready picks. They've been kind of splitting time with the 4 attackmen with Melendez behind and then him on the wing. He seems a lot more aggressive on the wing, which I think is probably good for Hopkins. I think they're going to be a team that's going to have to prove they can draw slides later in the year. That's kind of what I'm talking about when I say teams are sliding maybe in February. It's going to get a little harder for them. I think Hop is probably a good candidate for that, so something to watch with them. One way that I noticed they're like trying to counteract this and pretty successfully is they're playing faster and they're taking chances in transition. They had 3 goals by non-offensive personnel against Towson. I think Smith had the sick ready to lefty split, which is just the game's gotten so much more skilled. We've kind of become desensitized to stuff like that. That's just ridiculous. And then Tyler 48, he had a goal, I believe, in the Towson game, and the faceoff guy Callahan did as well. So, and they're playing sub games. They're just kind of playing faster. Then the last note I had, especially from the Denver game, is Scott Smith and Kilrain are awesome, man. They have 2 legit cover guys, and we've talked about, I think, maybe some of the stuff going on offense, even though they've gotten to double digits and looked all right in the first 2 games, but that defense has potential to be pretty filthy.
Yeah, that defense is going to be tough to deal with. We talk about teams that are going to need to be able to draw slides. When you have 2 elite cover men like that, it becomes that much harder. You're looking at can my 3rd attackman draw a slide? Can my 2nd midi, if we can't beat a pole, draw a slide? That starts to be a really tough question to ask. And yeah, I like the way that Hopkins is playing in transition. Certainly, in the early going here, I think they're trying to find opportunities there, and it's a good way to do it early in the season where teams aren't going to be as good at that. But I think, Coach Nadalin, I think after the Towson game had said, look, we saw them play Denver, and we knew from that game they are going to be really good and really aggressive going from D to O. And we saw it happen there with Smith's goal. I think Tyler I's goal was like a rebound, or it kind of found him in a slow break situation. And Callahan's goal, I think, might have been the biggest goal of the game for Hopkins. They were desperate for one when he kind of scored off the faceoff. And he has been definitely very good for them in the early going. I think his performance against Denver was good. We kind of talked last week, it's wild to think about it, but Denver probably really they look like they might have a deficiency at the faceoff spot, which we just haven't said in a decade. But Callahan was great there. I thought Callahan was maybe going to be – I would have made him the underdog going into the game against Towson with Constantinides and some of Towson's personnel, but I think he basically won the matchup there. He won, I think, the first 4 against Constantinides, and then they moved to Kai Perez instead because they just needed to find a better answer to try and counter this Hopkins faceoff unit. So I think that's emerged kind of as a story for Towson, is that Logan Callahan's been really good through 2 games, and that's going to help them a lot. And when you compound that with Scott Smith and Quentin Kilrain and Luke Stout has been, very solid in net for them, it's that combo that we're used to seeing from a Denver of we're going to win all the faceoffs, so your possessions are going to be limited. And the ones you do have, it's going to be really hard to create in a settled situation because we have a really good netminder and really good cover guys. So the Hopkins construction from that end of the field, I think there's different schools of thought of, is the faceoff guy part of the defense or the offense? I've always considered them to be kind of part of the defense because they keep the ball in the offensive end of the field. That defensive kind of grouping with Callahan, Kilrain, Smith, Luke Stout, net. Patrick Deans has been very good at LSM. I see Patrick Hackler kind of all over the field, winning ground balls. He's part of their clear, right? Like it's a tough group to handle. So I know that it was kind of, as I said, I kind of want to see them settled, move the ball faster. I too like Melendez on the wing way more than I like him at X. I know he's kind of playing there for now, and the Hopkins offense, I think their X guy, he's basically his job is usually get it from one wing to the other wing and don't have to worry about doing too much else. But I think Melendez on that righty wing, I'm infinitely more scared of him as a defense if he's dodging from there than I am if he's dodging from X.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a kind of classic X or like attackman and kind of slash feed, and he can do all those things, but he can really shoot it. I think that's the thing that kind of separates him is for a guy who doesn't look like a big, like he's not a massive dude. He can really hum it, and I think just makes him more dangerous. With that being said, they're going to want to try to find something behind the net, whether it's inverts or big littles, trying to replace Angelis. They're obviously very difficult. Again, 2 road victories in 4 or 5 days. It sounds like we're being a little bit critical here. It's been a really good start for Hopkins, and you got to be fired up. Chuck Rawson, 51, Burlington guy. I thought it gave him some good juice. Want to move on, just kind of emptying some
kids, man. It's all the Lawrenceville kids.
Yeah,
I said it last night. The 2022 Lawrenceville team had Kilrain, had Chuck Rawson, had Brooks English, had Hunter Chevette, had Tyler Eye. All these guys were scoring goals for Hopkins last night. Like the team was insane.
Yeah. Towson, I thought actually was not actually, because they took a top 10 team right to the end, but pretty good. 21 turnovers, 6 field clears. Again, you're just not going to win very many games. For people that are trying to kind of watch the game more closely, go look at the box score, and the first page of the box score is a PDF, and it has all the team stats. It's a great way to just look at what happens in a game, because it is a game of math in the end. I do that for every game that I analyze, and stuff like the failed clears just jumps off the page. Like it's just, and there'll be a few more things I'll kind of mention throughout the show. But if you're looking to kind of watch a little more closely, go check those out. And then the other thing I said like about Towson was like they have some juice. They have a little bit more juice than like a lot of teams. Obviously, we saw. I'm butchering that pronunciation, but he can really move. And Gallagher was good, and obviously the Fitzpatrick kid. They have like some unassisted kind of dodging juice, and I think that's going to suit them pretty well. But want to move on quickly to Utah, Ohio State. I had some notes on this, but why don't you lead us off? Just kind of big thoughts after that one.
Yeah, I guess serves me right. I'm done buying stock in Ohio State this year. I guess. I mean, the Utes come to Columbus and put up 19 in week 1, and a good shout for you last week when you said the higher the score gets, the better it's going to be for Utah.
Yeah.
So nice prediction from you on that one. I was surprised to see the 19 number. Henry Blake started the net. Caleb Fyock came on in relief for Ohio State. I think it was kind of an interesting question for them about how they would go in the net. Blake was really the starter last year and he got hurt very, very early in the season. I think the first or second game, and Fyock played the rest of the way and was awesome. And I think, I certainly coming into the season thought like Fyock won the job. He's going to keep the job to start with, without, I didn't see them a whole ton in the fall, but Blake got the start, and then, Fyock got the start again on Tuesday when they sort of sorted themselves out against Detroit Mercy. But I think for me, the thing that I was surprised most with Ohio State was there were some defensive breakdowns that seemed pretty basic. And given their personnel and some of the experience that they have on that end of the field, I was very surprised to see it. There were guys who were playing for Utah where it was like, look, the guy drew a slide, and then the 2 slide is just nowhere. Or guys are just open in front. We're going to get to some of our FAFO players later. I'll tease you one now. Like Utah's Luke McNamara, he scored 5 goals. His last goal of the game was a slide went to a Utah Dodger, and McNamara was just standing like butt naked in front of the crease, like nobody within 4 yards. And I'm like, I know we're at the end here. Maybe we're a little dejected because the game's not going how you want, but like, what? How is this happening? There were some rebounds that were right around the crease that ended up being Utah goals.
A lot of them.
That like if you've got Bobby Van Buren and Cullen Brown and some of these guys on defense, like bodies need to be on the ground, and that ground ball's got to be in an Ohio State stick. So I think if I'm Coach Myers and I look at kind of the film there on the defensive end, that's probably what jumps out to me the most is the intensity that they maybe lacked on rebound ground balls and some of the loose ball wins in their own defensive end. And then again, I've been gassing them up, but Jack Goldman was not as dominant facing off against Utah as I maybe expected he might be. He was much better on Tuesday. Ohio State across the board was much better on Tuesday. Obviously, it's a weaker opponent, but
good way to bounce back.
I think, I think some of the breakdowns on defense is what stood out to me as I watched the most because I expected that unit to be such a strength for them. I really thought that they would be able to limit Utah certainly to less than 19 goals. Like, I think Utah's got some talent. Again, we've been loud about how much we love Ryan Steins, but they also graduated their next like 5 top scorers from a year ago after Steins. And so everybody else there is new. And if everybody else there is new and they're seeing Brown and Van Buren for the first time, like, I have to think that has to be edge Buckeyes, but it wasn't. So the defensive breakdowns, I think, again, and some of the loose ball play in their defensive end was where I thought Ohio State kind of lost the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree that the face-off advantage was big. Utah also shot a lot better. Now, and keyword there, I'm talking about shooting, not goaltending, because they put 34 of their 43 shots on goal. Ohio State just 25 of their 39 shots on goal. I just be careful when you, not to you, but like for anyone out there, maybe they were just really good shots because they hit a bunch. And just a really good coaching job, I thought, from Andrew McMinn and his staff. They basically sat on the ball for at least 60 seconds of every possession, and they had a bunch of them, and Ohio State gave them a few more turnovers. And then they were just really good at the end of the shot clock. They scored a bunch right at the end, 3 or 4 rebound goals. Not going to be a fun week at Ohio State practice. There's only one way to practice rebounds, and it's not very fun, especially for O guys. Put the foils on this week, and it gets difficult. But I think the Ohio State defense, could still be really good. There's a lot of like kind of small things they can clean up: the rebounds, the end of clock kind of gambles. Obviously Utah shot well. That's not always going to happen. So still potential there. Also want to shout out, we have talked about some of our maybe complaints about a few things. I thought it was a good broadcast from the Ohio State crew, BTN Plus, a knowledgeable staff there. And those Utah black uniforms are nasty. I love them. So that's what I have. Also, Ohio State's got a player named Johnny Cool. Sick.
They do. There's some great names out there. Yeah. Johnny Cool is one of them. Yeah. The Ohio State broadcast, the BTN Plus broadcast there, that's one where it's like, I don't mind paying for BTN Plus if that's what I get. That venue that they play in there in Columbus too, it's like they figured out the right spot for the camera there, and so you're at a good angle, you're at a good distance away. The guys know what they're talking about. They're getting names right, which is like, we have to have that be the bar, I guess. But I thought the broadcast was good there. And then look, I think like, I know I'm poo-pooing Ohio State here. I think they're going to be fine. I still like a lot of their personnel, as individual players and everything. It's just a matter of like sorting out where guys are going to fit in. They've got Jack McKenna running through the midfield, and I see Jack as like, he's like 6'5". He's this tower of a guy. I see him more as a guy who plays around the crease, or, he's great off end line restarts kind of stuff. He's a natural attackman. It's a tough guy to kind of expect to be comfortable in the midfield right away. So, maybe they kind of get things, sorted out as guys settle into the position they're going to play and who they're going to play with and all that. And you kind of hope they sort that out. Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep it moving here. Let's move on to the FAFO of the week. Maybe a little bit too much profanity in episode 1, so we'll stick with FAFO now. But I think the people know what we mean. Why don't we do one each here, and then we'll do some honorable mentions. And why don't you go first? Sure. So I had a couple, and I put the call out on social. If there's anybody that you think I didn't see or should deserve to get mentioned here, who would it be? Shout out to Hayden Lewis, who called out Kevin Parnham from Penn State, who I think decked somebody at goal line extended. I didn't see that. And then he made himself a FAFO person because he went and saw Penn State like shoot like garbage on the basketball court instead of watching Hopkins Towson. But shout out to Hayden Lewis, who does a good job covering the chaos in the PLL. My FAFO guy, I already kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I went with Luke McNamara from Utah.
Love it.
19 goals by the Utes. McNamara is a freshman there. He is from Kansas. Like, I mentioned this on social, like 10-point scorers for Utah from 9 different states. None of those states are Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or Connecticut. None of them.
Crazy.
Some of the guys went to school in them. Sure, they're not from there. And it's like point scorers, Oregon, North Carolina, like Steins is from North Carolina, Kansas, Illinois, Georgia, Minnesota, Ohio. Like, it's pretty awesome the way that Utah kind of grabs these guys from everywhere.
Sure.
And when I mentioned it, Will Manning was just like, take a visit there. It's hard to say no. And I was like, yeah, I would imagine. Like, you see kind of what that campus is like, what the views there are like, their facilities are like. I imagine when somebody takes a visit there, it does get pretty hard to say no pretty quick. But look, McNamara, freshman, like I said, 5 goals. So kind of an unknown if you're a freshman. You're not going to be on scouts in week 0. But Ohio State found out for sure in this one. First goal was one of those rebound goals. That's just like a Will confidence goal from a freshman. That's awesome. I think the most, find out themed one of these was he had a goal on man up, and he plays kind of the top lefty shooter spot in that Utah man up. And Ohio State put their short stick there, and just like as a sort of as a scheme, like a basic rule of man down, usually at some levels tends to be put your short stick where you think the worst shooter is, or the guy you're not going to need to close out to is, the guy who doesn't have range, because he's not going to pull it from too far away. And if he does, it's probably not a great shot. So Ohio State put their short stick in front of McNamara, and McNamara promptly stepped into one and scored on man up from like a good 13, 14 yards. That's a find out kind of goal. So McNamara, he had another rebound goal. Again, he's like just kind of great around the net. And then he had the easiest one maybe of his Utah career was that one that came late where he was just wide open on the crease. But his first 4 goals came in about 17 minutes of game clock. And he was opportunistic. He was smart. He took what the defense gave him, and he did it 5 times in the game.
Yeah, I love it. I actually had a Utah guy as well. I'll kind of go to that in the honorable mentions. I'm going to go with the Big Ten. I talked last week about how, we weren't sure what we were going to get. Overall, a really good week for the conference. Rutgers gets a big win over Lehigh. Again, a Rutgers team that we didn't really know what to expect. Maryland takes it to Richmond really for most of that game. They're really in the driver's seat. A good pushback by Richmond, but still a nice start from Maryland. Penn State avenges last year's loss to Colgate. Hopkins goes on the road, gets a top 10 win or top 15 or whatever it is, and then comes home and then gets another top 20 road win. And really Utah obviously was Ohio State was kind of the only one. And then Michigan, pounds Marquette. So a good weekend overall for the conference. Obviously a lot of big games left to play. Some of those Ivy League Big Ten games, obviously ACC Big Ten games are going to be important, but it's a good week for them. A lot of good wins, a lot of road wins, and a lot of those fan bases have to be feeling pretty good about it. I think after week 0, week 1. So yeah, then why don't you do your honorable mentions?
Sure, I got 2 honorable mentions here. Number 1, I got Remington Reynolds at Loyola.
Yeah.
Part of this is me finding out because last week on the podcast, I think I made the assertion that Loyola was not going to be able to effectively cover Aiden Carroll, or that Aiden Carroll was going to be a mismatch. So I got to be loud wrong on that. Reynolds covered Carroll from the get-go. Carroll started the game at attack. Carroll's first dodge basically went nowhere, just moved the ball forward. Second dodge that he took resulted in kind of this off-balance pass that was, ended up being mishandled and ultimately going Loyola's way. Third dodge was an alley dodge where he threw a nice assist. So credit to Carroll on that one. His next dodge ended with Remy Reynolds yard sailing Carroll at the top of the box, picking up the ball, running a break, and getting an assist. So, and at the end of the first quarter, or midway through the second quarter, somewhere in there, Georgetown ended up just moving Aiden Carroll to midfield. Moved him away from Reynolds altogether. So, the find out portion of this, I am at least in part directing it myself for not giving Remy Reynolds enough credit last week.
Yep.
And then Georgetown can share some of it too. Finished the game 3 caused turnovers, 2 ground balls, and an assist. And he handled that Carroll matchup extremely well. And I'll give you my other honorable mention. the Bucknell offense, the entirety of that offensive group. Nobody scored more points in week 0 than Connor Davis. He had a snowman for goals. He put up 8 goals. He had an assist too. So 9 points in this game. His 8 goals came on 14 shots. Michael Meyer, the other top attackman for Bucknell, which is almost Michael Myers, and I wish it was, so you can call him the boogeyman. He had 8 points, 4 and 4. Bucknell's midfield last year ago was a really young group, right? Like Luke Brunner, Sean Berrigan, Peter Gandolfo, all freshmen a year ago, all kind of in that top midfield run for them. Gandolfo, I think might be their primary midfield dodging threat. I think you could make a case he was last year. Connecticut bias again, but look, Gandolfo should get a poll for them every week because short sticks just cannot handle his change of direction. But 15 different Bison had a point this week. Meyer and Davis took 25 shots and scored goals on 12 of them. And then they had 7 players on the team took 3 or more shots. 6 of them shot 33% or better. 4 of them shot over 50%. They had a 9-0 third quarter. Like a lot of teams are going to find out, I think, this year. The Bison offense is no joke. I like Bucknell in the Patriot League. Patriot League's an insane conference. Every year it's like the Hunger Games, just try and survive.
Yeah.
But the Bucknell offense, I think, was cooking week 1. And that's the level that you can kind of expect them to stay at. So we're all kind of finding out about Bucknell this week. It was Mary Mac's turn to find out on the field.
Love it. I'll go quick here. I had number 13, Luke Martin on Hopkins, had the Rusty Gate in the Towson game yesterday. Yes. An absurd time and place to pull it, and just awesome stuff. Marcus was all over it on the broadcast, but a pretty sick play there. And then the Utah guy I had was Nico DePonio, honorable mention All-American last year, had 9 ground balls as a non-faceoff man. That was the most of any non-faceoff guy in week 0. Had 81 loose balls and 35 caused turnovers. Again, in Canada, we call them loose balls. Don't come for me. And 9 is just a lot. And a lot of those faceoff wins that really tilted the game for Utah, were his plays. And Utah's got a good little balance. I think last year they really thrived in the chaos. This year they seem like they want to be really aggressive on defense and then pretty controlled on offense. That's a pretty lethal combination, and they're going to really make you earn it. So they caused a lot of turnovers, created a lot of havoc against Ohio State, and then their offense would go for long possessions, and DePonio was a big part of that. So that leads us into a new segment. This is your idea. I think people are going to love it. It's the Sicko game of the week. So this is basically a game that like a non-top 10 game, a game that you otherwise wouldn't think to watch, that you should watch for whatever reason it may be. So why don't you lead us off for the Sicko game of the week?
Yeah, if you're familiar with the Sickos committee on social media, they watch football and basketball mostly, but like they are dedicated to finding the game that like most fans are not seeking out, but they have a ton of fun watching it. While Alabama and Georgia are playing over here, they're watching Iowa and Illinois punt the ball to each other. Yeah. So my Sicko games of the week, I got a couple that I think are worth watching. One is Bellarmine and Mercyhurst. Again, like I'm going to watch this game because I am a Sicko, but you should probably make some time for it too. Bellarmine coming off the 26-7 heartbreaker against Duke. Mercyhurst is playing their first D1 game. Okay, so I'm going to tell you this, though. The Lakers have players that are worth tuning in for, 2 in particular. Ethan Landymore is a grad student there. He had over 200 points in his time with Mercyhurst. He's been an All-American for them. He's a very talented attackman. And then Jeremy Phoenix Lefebvre, like first team all-name for sure. Canadian. But he is a throwback midfielder like everybody loves. He will run both ends of the field. He's a guy who's going to finish games where it's like, all right, 2 goals on 3 shots, an assist, 2 caused turnovers, and 5 ground balls. Like one of those just kind of mutant stat lines. You're just like, are you sure he came off the field? So those 2 guys alone, to me, make that game worth tuning in for. 2 other games, I think Mount St. Mary's and LIU. This kind of hinged on LIU's performance against Rutgers, which was not the best. But look, LIU was a 10-win team a year ago, and they returned a lot of their talent. I think that conference in the NEC is pretty up for grabs, but there's that one. And then NJIT and St. John's. This is like the definition of a Sicko
People's team, baby.
Look, yeah, the Highlanders, baby, started 7-0 a year ago. There could be only one. The first of NJIT's wins a year ago was a 10-8 victory over St. John's. It's revenge time for St. John's in this one. Look, I like Justin Turry as a coach too. The Johnnies return, I think, 2 of their top scorers. NJIT, like, you got to love it. That is a game where you got to save some screen time for it. So those are my Sicko games of the week right there.
All right, so my Sicko games of the week. First one's Bryant versus Providence. Maybe a little unfair to call this a Sicko game because I think these are 2 pretty good teams. But Richie Joseph, 8 goals, 0 assists. Ryan Bell, 0 goals, 8 assists. That is a bromance like you read about, and just fun to watch there. And also tight with both those staffs. Bobby Benson, I played for him in Maryland. One of the smartest offensive guys you'll ever run into. Also, just a great dude. And then Zach Goodrich coaching at Bryant now, so good luck to those guys. And then we had someone come at us on Twitter saying we don't talk about Queens and Hobart enough. So Queens versus Holy Cross, Hobart Canisius. I've officially talked about Queens and Hobart on the podcast. Sicko games of the week. You can join our friend on Twitter talking about that. And then anything on Flow Live Sports I have as a Sicko game. I love college lacrosse. I would love to say I don't care who knows it, but I do care who knows it because Flow Live Sports knows that, and they're abusing it. And I paid the subscription this morning for the year. Just too expensive. And it's ridiculous. And it pisses me off that it's not on ESPN Plus. And if you are logging on to Flow Live Sports, you either have a relative on a Big East team, you played for a Big East team, or you are a Sicko. And for those reasons, it is my Sicko game of the week.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah, it's the frustration. I don't want to spend. I already talked streaming, but like when I pay $10 to watch the Denver game and it's outstanding, and then I pay $30 to watch a Flow Live game and it's like, again, like Super Nintendo lacrosse, like.
Yeah, and you
got to at least get the names right. You got to get people on there spelling, saying the names right. If I'm going to pay $30 to watch lacrosse games for a month, like, and also, I have to set the bar at least there.
Flow Live has a monthly option and an annual option, as does every other streaming subscription service in the world. It is like egregiously different in price. Like the yearly option is like the monthly option like rips your eyes out, forces you to get the yearly option. Frustrating. Let's move on to some games this week. Yep. Let's start with Michigan, North Carolina. We've seen Michigan play. They 14-1 over Marquette. They graduate a lot from last year. Tiernan's gone. Pedersen is gone. Michael Bohm is gone. And the face-off man, Wheatfeld, is gone. Ryan Cohen's still there. A bunch of other players, good players still there. Pace Billings in from Princeton, amongst a few other transfers. Carolina, we have not yet seen them. A lot of expectations for this team. Duffy back, Pitcham-Alla back, Tolman back, Wambach back. Gianfracaro's in, Wertheim's in, Dupuy's in, a lot of new faces. We talked about them a little last week, but what are you looking for here is 15 Michigan at 16 North Carolina.
Yeah, with Michigan, it's tough to know what you can really glean from their game last week. 14-1 over Marquette. I don't know how much you're really learning there. Like, Marquette graduated a lot defensively, particularly Woodward and Creaser being gone. So, Jake Richard is in his first year coaching there. I love Jake, but I think it's going to be a culture building kind of year in Marquette. Yeah. A fun thing about this game is that these two teams haven't played since 2016. I went back and looked, and it's been a while. It's like the last time Michigan played North Carolina, they had a senior attackman named Kyle Jackson and a junior midfielder named Mikey Schlosser on the team. So it's been a little while. The UNC team that year, we all remember, went on that magical run through the tournament
sure.
and got themselves a ring. So Michigan's come a long way since the last time they played North Carolina. That year in 2016, Michigan went 3-10. Last year, they were a Big Ten tournament champ. I think a key spot here is going to be the face-off. Jackie Weller went 12 of 18 against Marquette. You mentioned Brady Wambach being back. He is a different animal than anything else, that Jackie has seen so far. Wambach went 61% last year as a freshman. Against out-of-conference opponents, he was even better. He was at 64. Guys he beat head-to-head in games are guys like McMeekin, Will Coletti, Jake Naso. Like, he goes toe-to-toe with the best in the business. He is an honorable mention All-American in the preseason. He also had 4 points last year, and he is a threat to hurt you if you do not stop the ball well. So, I think I kind of look at that spot for Carolina. Carolina's offense last year, 279 points, 151 of them, so more than half of them, came from 3 guys. Logan McGovern, who went pro, Owen Duffy, and Dom Petramala. I think Dom Petramala could be a key guy in this game. Duffy's going to go best on best, right? He's going to get the best defenseman Michigan has. It's probably going to be Billings, I would imagine, is what I would expect. Yep. So complementary scoring kind of becomes important after that, and that's what makes Petramala's role so important as a Dodger, as a scorer. After those 3 guys, nobody on Carolina had more than 17 points last year. So where's kind of your other scoring going to be coming from is always a question I have, particularly for teams where I think you would expect a run to like the tournament is you need depth of scoring. You need scoring through your midfield. Only 5 other guys even hit double digits for them last year. I think a key way to get other guys involved, one of the guys you mentioned there, Nick Dupuis, comes over from Stony Brook from UMBC before that. He had 60 assists and led the CAA in assists per game. He was over 3 helpers per game. Only 2 UNC players had 20 or more assists in the season last year. One of those guys, again, McGovern, gone to the pros. So I think you look at Billings, Van Wees, and Whitney as the guys who started down low for Michigan, and you say, all right, Billings to Duffy, what am I going to do with Van Wees and Whitney? Those are 2 guys who played some LSM last year, played some close last year, maybe new to being like the definitely close defensive starter guy. So, are you going with Whitney on Petro? Like, how are you kind of doing that? And how are you going to feel comfortable in those matchups? I think the UNC, another X factor for them is I think their rope unit makes them pretty dangerous. I love Andrew O'Barry as a defensive midfielder. He was great at Harvard. I know he missed time, last year with injury, but he really is a great player. And then Ty English is pretty good. Ty English is back there as a short stick defensive midfielder for them. He had a good year last year. So that unit on paper is good. I said it last week, everything about North Carolina on paper is good. Michael Gianfrancaro is one of the best goalies in the country. Like they have all the pieces. But this is a good early test for them. They're going to be playing a team that's played a game. Michigan's, had game action. Again, is it how valuable is it to go shut out Marquette for 50 minutes? I don't know, but just playing against somebody in a different colored uniform in a game that counts is valuable experience, and Michigan has it. So for UNC, I think you want to start fast. You want to start with Wambach, having a great first quarter, getting the ball to guys like Duffy and Petramala early, often, letting those guys test matchups. And in football, people used to say, you feel good when the game starts when you set your pads. When you get that first big hit on somebody, your pads kind of settle on your body and you're in it. I think UNC wants to set their pads early in this one, right? Get that first big goal, attack a matchup early, get confidence early against Michigan.
Yeah, a few things I'm watching. I think that's a fantastic breakdown. What are they kind of doing behind the net? Because Duffy likes to be back there a lot. Dupuis is going to be back there a lot. Petramala is another attackman. They have guys like James Matten, who's another attackman. So they have a lot of attackman-type guys in there. And I was reading some stuff, getting prepped for this, and Coach Bresci's talked about a little bit more of a positionless offense. So curious to see what that like. Curious also, might we see guys like Dupuis coming out the midfield line trying to really emphasize those invert situations, those attackmen on short stick situations. So I think there's some interesting questions there, and I think it's safe to say we're going to see probably quite a few players from UNC on the weekend as they try to find their flow. But the faceoff guy will help, and the goaltending will help. If you need proof of that, go look at Maryland's run through the tournament last year. If you decisively win those 2 spots, the math just gets a lot better for you. Gianfrancaro named a captain this year, his first year on campus, always a good sign of the type of person that a guy is when that happens. We've seen that happen a few times. Another interesting thing I had was 6 of the first 7 games are at home for Carolina this year, and out of their 14 regular season games, only 5 of them total are on the road. So defending Chapel Hill is going to be important, but also a real opportunity there. You should not be losing that many games at home, especially when it's a hard place to travel to. And a lot of these teams are making a long trip. Michigan, if you haven't looked at a map recently, not very close to Chapel Hill, and a beautiful facility down there. They're going to want to defend that place to the best of their abilities. Also, Not sure if you heard, Bill Belichick coaches at UNC now. If you're looking for lacrosse drinking game, maybe the Belichick mention on the UNC broadcast. I'm not sure if you heard he's got deep ties to lacrosse. I'm not sure if that's come up once or twice. If they get a national broadcast on ESPN this year, look out.
Yeah. Thank you for listening, Coach Belichick. I appreciate you tuning in too.
Yeah. The only other thing I had for Michigan, I had two more things. Jackie Weller, the faceoff guy, I watched him play at the NCBS box tournament this year. The kid's a bulldog, plays super hard. Excited to see him go against. He kind of plays like an underdog. So going against an All-American type guy, it's going to be fun to watch. And then Ryan Cohen, who's their best player back from last year, really one of the best players in the whole Big Ten that returns, had 14 shots against Marquette. So if you're maybe looking for a style shift this year, a guy who's a pretty good feeder, pretty balanced scorer, certainly looking to get his own there. But I think we touched kind of all the big ones. That's going to be a great game. Why don't we touch on UMass Army? You can lead this one. You know UMass. You just saw him play last week. And obviously we talked about Army a little bit already, but why don't you kind of tell us what you're thinking about here?
Yeah, I went up and I saw UMass scrimmage Yale last week on the first on Saturday. That's the first day the Ivies can, I think, officially really get going. They have some kind of stuff during the week leading up, but Yale spent their first official day scrimmaging UMass, and Harvard spent theirs scrimmaging Stony Brook. So the teams get into it early. Army and UMass is always a banger, or it's been a banger every year for the last 3 years. The last three meetings, final scores are 13-12, 10-8, 14-13, and Army won two of those games. I think, this game is really important to the two of us because we both had the very loud take that Army is awesome and everyone is underrating them. So we get to learn a lot about how right we were about that, I think, this week. UMass lost a lot a year ago. You lose, I think you start with losing Matt Note, who went pro, who was, an All-American caliber goalie for them a year ago. I think was the conference goalie of the year. And you got to remember, he took over for Sean Scanoni there. So they've had this run of exceptional goaltending play at UMass. And so you have to kind of break in another new goalie there. And that's not always easy. And then UMass's top 7 scorers last year were seniors. So it is basically a new offense there, or just a ton of new guys on the offensive end. There are guys who got in a lot of games, and I think, you can expect to see them in bigger roles. The first one I kind of look at is Charlie Kurtz. Charles Kurtz is a Connecticut biased Cheshire kid. But first of all, go watch his senior highlight film in Connecticut because he does tools on people and it's unfair and it's fun. But he played attack at Cheshire High School on a line with Matt Jeffrey, who's the number 1 freshman in the country at Notre Dame this year. Their attack was fun to watch. But look, Kurtz is a 6'2", 210. He's a converted attackman. He's playing in the first midfield group for UMass. He played in 13 games for them last year, right? He was in the midfield mix, didn't have a ton of production because he was more of a secondary guy. He becomes, I think, more of a primary, if not the kind of top midfield dodging option for them. I think he's really, really good when he's dodging from wings, from either low or high wings. He kind of has this great, way of using his head and shoulders to kind of deceive his where he's going and send a defender the wrong way and then kind of get himself moving. And once he does that, it's just he's good at putting his shoulder into somebody or just, getting his body in a position to get leverage and then just lean and lean and lean until he gets to where he wants on the field. He did this really well in his first dodge of the game against Yale. He scored the first goal of the game, right? He put UMass up 1-0 in that one. So, I think him as a guy who's going to be a weapon for them out of the midfield is one of the first guys I watch. Number 2 guy I watch for UMass is Aiden Drunsick, who played at X for them in the scrimmage against Yale. Another guy where it's look, he has a decent amount of game appearances last year, not a ton of points. But he showed some nice ability, I think, as a Dodger, kind of shaking his pole, and he really stands out because he plays head up really well. He's looking for skip lanes. He's looking for, to make the right pass and move the ball along after he kind of starts his dodge. He's not always going to attack the net super hard, or at least he didn't against Yale, but found some nice skips, found some nice feeds inside, had a couple of assists in the game. So having a guy like that, look, he's not going to wow you with ankle breakers or anything like that, but he's going to get his hands free and be looking to make the right feed, is a good, safe guy to put the ball in the stick of when your offense is going to be new. And then they started a freshman at attack, this kid, Robbie Granara, who played pretty fearless lacrosse for a freshman. And that's, I think, what you want to see is like confidence, and he's not afraid to shoot the ball. You can tell he's not like white knuckling his stick out there and just like, hoping he catches it when he looks comfortable, he looked calm. He found a lot of nice ways to kind of get his hands free and get shots off, even when he's covered. He's one of those guys who has that sort of step away from the defenseman and shoot underhand kind of move in his bag, or shoot around his guy. So he can be kind of crafty like that. I think when you see somebody who's not afraid to make a mistake or not afraid to kind of take that shot as a freshman, it's somebody who you can, you feel good about again in a new offense. You don't want somebody out there playing scared. Is he going to make some freshman mistakes? I'm sure. He's going to be out there against a really good defensive unit. He's probably going to have, a couple of shots you're going to want him to take back, that kind of thing. But, he's not ready to be a ball dominant guy or anything. But a freshman being out there playing with confidence is another guy I certainly want to watch. And then I think, when you look at units on the field that are going to be difference makers, number one, an unproven offense against a defense or a program that prides itself on defense, right? With a pilot in that group. And then Army should have a big face-off edge in this game. It's Will Coletti.
Third best face-off team in the country last year.
Yeah, you're looking at the potential for some scoring runs for Army, for UMass gets one and then Army plays make it take it to score 3 straight, like that kind of thing happening. I don't know the path. I didn't see from what I saw in UMass's face-off unit a way for them to overcome that. So I don't know how UMass kind of pulls this off, but those are the guys I think I'm most interested to see as foundational pieces for a UMass offense that's getting rebuilt this year.
Yeah, it's a great insight from you there. A weird year last year for Army, just coming through it. They get all the way to number 1. They have huge wins at Rutgers, at Cuse, a few other ACC wins, and then they lose to BU in Colgate in short order. BU again in the tournament, only 3 losses. Other years, maybe that's going to get you in. I think it was just kind of who the losses were to, maybe, but 9th in scoring offense, 25th in scoring defense. Again, for Army, that's a little unusual. Normally those kinds of things would be flipped on their head. They lose a few guys offensively. They're going to miss the loss of Jacob Morin. He was a pretty slick player. Slickness not usually the kind of strong suit of Army lacrosse. They got a lot of aggressive downhill guys, so I think the slickness helped. But Plunkett, Coletti, Pilati are all American type guys. You got 3 of them at marquee positions. That should be pretty helpful. And in a like I've been talking about, maybe an era of less sliding, Army's got a lot of guys who can get their own shots, and they're going to be hard to play against. But UMass has been hard to play against forever. For UMass last year, 25th scoring defense, 35th scoring offense, 6 and 8. So kind of just looking for an identity. The best way to get good is to get good at something. Just, kind of hang your hat on something. Let's touch very quickly. We've been going for a while, but just Georgetown Hopkins this weekend. We've talked about Hopkins a lot. Georgetown, very good face-off day against Loyola. I don't know how much there is to really gain from that win against Loyola. Loyola really had to replace their whole team. Quite a few turnovers. Not a lot of shots given their possession, so kind of a bunch of long possessions. Kevin Miller, a guy we didn't necessarily have circled, had a hat trick. Cesare had 3 goals. Fulton Bayman 2 and 2. I don't have a whole lot to add. I think we just got to see Georgetown against kind of a better team, but should be a doozy on Saturday.
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at that game, and again, to keep it up, because we've talked Hopkins a lot, to keep it on the Georgetown side, I want to start way better than I did against Loyola. Hoyas fans, you cannot look me in the eye and tell me you weren't nervous when it was like a 4-1 Loyola first quarter. After the way last year went and everything, I'm sure there were some Hoya fans out there like, is this a here we go again? But look, I think you feel good about the face-off. You might feel like you even have 2 weapons now, right? With Prince, who had a great day, but he isn't even really the primary guy, right? James Ball was banged up, so you kind of get a freshman in there who plays incredibly well in his first action. I think you feel good about that, knowing you maybe have a change of pace guy. And we talked about Logan Callahan, the start he's out to for Hopkins. It's a nice thing to have, to maybe be like, all right, if one guy's not feeling it, I feel okay that I can go to Prince or I can go to Ball, vice versa, however you want to do it. I think for the Hoyas, there's good matchups to be had around here. You got Ty Banks. I would imagine he goes and guards Melendez. And then, you start looking around on the field and you say, who's going to play where when it comes to who's going to guard Matt Collison, who's going to be the pole that we trust to close out on Hunter Chevette. Georgetown used Robert Plath, who's a freshman, a really good player out of Brunswick, but a freshman in a experience, in a game against a team like this Hopkins team that has a lot of different guys who can shoot the hell out of the ball, where closeouts are important. Like your footwork as a defenseman and the way you approach and break down is important. You need to be thinking about, can this guy get a shot off if I come to this spot? I need to make sure my feet are with me all the time. I cannot be leaning. I cannot give him leverage. Everybody on Hopkins, in the way they dodge, if they have leverage, they're getting where they want to go. The way Georgetown's, I think, polls approach and the way they match up with some of these weapons is going to be important. So yeah, kind of a quick hitter there on Georgetown, but I think the way they deploy their defense and they try and match up, again, I feel like it'll probably be Banks on Melendez. And then after that, you kind of touch and go. But the face-off battle, I think all of a sudden becomes very intriguing because of the way Georgetown played against Loyola. And then if you're the Hoyas, you need to not have a bad start. If you spot Hopkins 4-1, that's not the same as spotting Loyola 4-1, because Hopkins can keep that snowball rolling. Loyola could not. So you need to make sure you start fast.
Yeah, Hopkins is playing with a lot of emotion too, in a really good way. Dive out mentality there. I'm going to try to clip some of them on social, but they're doing this hilarious thing where guys who aren't even close to the ball are diving like 40 feet away, and it's awesome. And I noticed Stout did it a few times, and that is absolutely being coached by Chase Erlin, who's working with the goaltenders there. I think he's director of ops. Every shot that has ever missed the net on Chase Erlin, he yells, "Goalie!" And as he's running out, even if he's not even close, I don't care if the entire other team is standing on the end line. Chase is appealing to the refs, and it was very, very effective for a long time. So good dive out mentality there for Hopkins, but not the kind of group you want to let get going. Selfishly, as a sicko, I would love to see them slide Banks up to Collison and just see those two guys go at it. Two of the best in the business.
Yeah. That would be Rocky and Drago just like trading punches that
yes.
Neither one of them is even concerned with trying to block the other guy's punch. It's just eating hooks to the jaw over and over again for the duration of the game. That would be fun.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that this is a rock fight. It could be a relatively low scoring game. Should be a very fun one. Again, going kind of quick on that, but we talked a lot of Hopkins earlier, and we'll have a lot more to talk about next week. I'm off this weekend. Good chance for me to watch games. Where are you heading out to something, or what are you watching?
I am going to be on Friday night, little Friday Night Lights. I'm going up to Fairfield. Fairfield U is about 25 minutes from where I live, so they are hosting Lehigh. So I'm going to go see the Stags host Lehigh. Fairfield's got a ton of talent back. I am bullish on them. Will Consoli and Jake Gilbert are both really good weapons on offense. They grabbed a D3 King, my guy Luke Fisher from Denison, out of the portal. So they return a ton of weapons. They have a defenseman, this kid Julian Radicic, who was all conference as a freshman last year. I think he was the conference freshman of the year even. They're in year 2 of the Adrian Torek-Orban offense. So he has his second year as OC. It's Baxter's 6th year. It's Baxter's 6th year as their head coach. The pieces are all in place there for Fairfield to really do some cool things. And Lehigh basically threw the game away against Rutgers because they cleared it, I'm going to say 50%. It's you can point to one stat and be like, oh, you lost right there. That's why. That's the only reason.
Where will you be?
Be a little cleaner, but
where will you be eating before the game?
If I'm going to Fairfield, it'll be between 2 spots. There's a Colony Grill in Fairfield that does some pretty good pizza, and then Archie Moore's Wings is right near Colony. They do some wonderful wings.
Okay.
That bar is a nice little kind of divey, cheersy bar spot too. So I might get some wings, might get some pizza. Both really super healthy options. We'll see what I go with.
Yeah, if you're a fan of Fairfield, go listen to the Back to the Bird episode with Greg Downing. Great episode over there. So, yeah, that's it for today, episode 2 of the College Lacrosse Show. Appreciate listening. We're on Spotify. Hopefully, we'll be on Apple Podcasts this weekend, YouTube, Lacrosse Culture Daily. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out everything Dan is doing as well at Sticks In. And, yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.